Hello, and welcome to the Community IT Innovators Technology Topics Podcast, where we discuss nonprofit technology, cybersecurity, tech project implementation, strategic planning, and nonprofit IT careers. Find us at communityit.com.
Thank you for joining Community IT for this podcast, Part 1. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and leave us a rating to help others find this leadership resource for nonprofits. Listen for Part 2 in your podcast feed.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Community IT and Build Consulting webinar for November 2019, titled How Data Quality Defines Your Organization. Today, I'll be introducing a simple framework for understanding data quality that you can use to help drive data quality conversations at your organizations, leading to improvements in the quality of your data, as well as fundraising outcomes and mission impact. A little bit of information quickly about Community IT and Build Consulting. We're two organizations that work exclusively with nonprofit organizations around their technology needs, serving over more than 1,000 nonprofits cumulatively. We help our clients make strategic IT and information systems decisions that support the mission, whereas Community IT is more focused on IT. Build Consulting is more focused on data management and information systems. And we have a collaborative approach that empowers our clients to make informed decisions for their organizations. As I said, Build Consulting is more focused on data management and information systems, and these are the services that we offer: assessments and roadmaps, software selections, support for implementations, serving clients in terms of helping them to engage with vendors and manage projects and perform change management effectively. We serve as interim or part-time CIOs for nonprofit organizations, and we also provide outsourced CRM data management. All of our services are designed to help clients transform themselves to better serve constituents of all types, including funders, donors, program beneficiaries, even staff, volunteers, board and committee members, and of course the general public. My name is Peter Miras. I'm a partner at Build Consulting. I have 20 years serving all manner of nonprofit organizations ranging in size from small and local to enterprise, global-sized organization across a wide variety of industry categories and mission orientations. And over the past 8 years, I've worked exclusively with nonprofit organizations. I've worked with over 100 clients in the nonprofit, government, and for-profit spaces. And I have 3 primary areas of expertise: information strategy in general, constituent relationship management, and communications. And I'm Build's resident expert on data quality. Build Consulting was founded with the belief that tomorrow's best nonprofits will use technology to transform themselves in the world. However, we were also looking at the industry statistics when we were started back in 2015 that more than 50% of nonprofit technology projects fail. And on analysis, the reason for this failure rate is that the technology moves forward, but the organization does not. In today's day and age, there's most often a good technology, or at least a sufficient technology solution for most nonprofit needs. And there's something else, not the system particularly, but other challenges that are leading to lack of having maximum effectiveness with chosen technology solutions. We often present this formula to our clients. It stands for old organization plus new technology equals expensive old organization. And this is just to underscore that transformation in technology projects is critical to your success. There's no such thing as a technology change project that isn't also to some degree an organizational change effort. To acknowledge that, we built something called the Information Strategy Framework, which evaluates nonprofit organizations as pertaining to their data and technology needs through the lens of leadership and governance, operational capacity, focusing a good deal on project or program management and change management, process and requirements documentation, data modeling, and then finally technology. And technology is intentionally placed last in this framework because it really underscores that unless you get everything upstream right of selecting and implementing the technology, you have a much greater chance of or risk of failure with that technology implementation. And today we're putting data squarely in the crosshairs of the conversation as we talk about data quality. And that leads us into our agenda for today. I'm going to quickly talk about some of Build Consulting's observations regarding data quality in the nonprofit space, and briefly talk about making the case for data quality so you can help introduce the conversation of why data quality at your organization. We're going to talk in a little bit more technical terms about the 5 dimensions of data quality with some accompanying case studies. And then I'll provide some practical recommendations that you can use to help your organizations think about data quality and prioritizing what data to collect and maintain. And finally, hopefully we'll have some time left for Q&A at the end. We had over 90 registrants for this webinar from a wide variety of nonprofit organizations throughout the United States and Canada. And I see that currently 22 of those registrants are currently attending. Thank you so much for being with us today to talk about this topic. As I said, I hope we'll have some time remaining at the end of the presentation for questions and answers. But if you asked a question during the registration process or during today's presentation that remains unaddressed by the end of today's session, my personal contact information will be provided immediately prior to the Q&A portion. So please feel free to reach out to me directly with a follow-up if need be. I'm happy to interact with you. So now we're going to get started into the meat of the topic. Build Consulting's been in a lot of conference rooms. We've been through multiple information system design, implementation, integration, and migration projects, and we've seen social good organizations encounter and then deal with or fail to deal with data quality issues. And the kinds of decisions they make regarding data quality are interesting to us in 3 different ways. First, data quality decisions have the ability to determine how successful an organization will be, how it sets itself up for success, mediocrity, or failure based on its ability to manage and leverage its data to make informed business decisions and also drive impact. Second, data quality decisions are profoundly revealing of the strengths and limitations of an organization. Does the organization have the strategic vision to make appropriate investments in data quality? Does it know what relationships the organization has and what data is profoundly important to nurturing and growing those relationships? And does it have the leadership and discipline to require staff to adhere to corporate policies, standards, and business processes that result in good data quality? And third, many organizations don't fully comprehend the picture of what data quality is or what data is. Data is all the information that your organization collects. It's both qualitative and quantitative, both structured and unstructured, or in another way of putting it, both the narrative and the numbers. So how do we make the case for data quality? I'm going to give you one example of how to do that within your organization. This is an aerial photo of the Washington Navy Yard, which may be familiar to some in the Washington, D.C. area. It's near where the Washington Nationals Stadium is. It's the oldest shore establishment of the U.S. Navy, and the photo you see here was taken in 1985, and superficially it appears to be somewhat like a prosaic urban landscape, as these things go. In 1980, Congress created the Superfund to pay for the cleanup of the country's most hazardous waste sites. And what a lot of people don't know is that in 1998, the EPA put the Washington Navy Yard on the national priorities list, one of the 1,700 prioritized cleanup projects of the 47,000 waste sites in the nation. This site today has a status of active, meaning that cleanup facilities have not yet been completed. The Anacostia River on which the Navy Yard is situated is part of a complex ecosystem about which much data has been collected, but about which there is still much to be learned. In data quality, we talk a lot about the real-world object. Data exists to describe a real-world object. The better the quality of your data, the better you are able to understand the real-world object and hence your relationship to it, how your actions impact it. Just as the river flows continuously, sometimes the real-world object is in a constant state of flux, and then it becomes more challenging to maintain accurate data. Good data quality has been and continues to be part of the Anacostia watershed cleanup process, which has seen participation from numerous organizations. Gathering and integrating high-quality data from various sources is critical to the work of those organizations and to other organizations, both large and small, participating in conservation efforts worldwide, such as those impacting the Washington Navy Yard and the Anacostia watershed adjacent. Whether removing contaminants from the Washington Navy Yard and the Anacostia watershed, running medical field trials in Africa, training small businesses in Afghanistan, empowering women and girls in Eastern Europe, or combating domestic violence in the United States, the information you gather about the people you serve and their local environment has a good deal to do with the impact of your efforts. With so much data lacking that we wish we could obtain, the quality of the data that we do have to describe those real-world objects becomes of paramount importance. Data quality directly helps to create life quality. Data quality is not just about accuracy, as we will see in the upcoming parts of the presentation, it's multidimensional. We need to place the right information in the hands of people at all levels of our organizations, from the C-suite to the frontline staff to the constituents. This will help to create greater efficiency and impact. By doing this, how can we help people do new and amazing things? Those are the questions that we should be asking ourselves. And finally, the data that you have enables you to have a voice, to be heard. You want to get through to people. The stories that you tell with the data that you have creates intellectual and emotional resonance with your key audiences. It communicates the value of your work and helps to secure the funds and influence necessary to do the work well. So having good data and easy access to the data and translating the data is very important to you telling a compelling story about your organization and the needs of its constituents and beneficiaries. Today, for the sake of simplicity, we are going to talk about 5 dimensions of data quality. Those who are familiar with data quality terminology as used by such major funders as USAID will recognize some points of familiarity and some differences. The dimensions that we're going to cover today are completeness, validity, that's a hard one, and accuracy, which are distinct concepts but well paired together, consistency, timeliness, and integrity. And we're going to take each one of these in turn, talk a little bit about what it is, and then provide a case story example of how it's important. When data is complete, it has all of the necessary or appropriate parts. We use the terms breadth and depth to describe these qualities of completeness. When we say breadth, we are asking, does the data have all of the expected attributes? Think of these attributes as columns in a spreadsheet. And when we say depth, we are asking, is the data set as fully populated as expected? Think about the rows in the spreadsheet. To provide a very simple illustration, when gathering constituent information, you do not have complete addresses if you are not capturing the state in which each constituent lives. The fact that you have a field or column of data to capture the state speaks to the completeness of breadth within the data set. The fact that you have a value in that column for each of the constituents is indicative of the depth of the data. Let's say that your organization is running an economic development program in Afghanistan, focused on training small business owners and entrepreneurs to engage in the global economy. As an aspect of data collection, the program managers and chiefs of party are tasked with collecting information on women served through these programs, an imperative coming from both the funder and your own organization. The program is executed through multiple technical assistance projects run out of various locations within Afghanistan, and the data collection is being done on paper and then entered into spreadsheets. However, the data collection method was not standardized, and some projects had a field to capture beneficiary gender and some did not. Some of the projects had a gender field but did not consistently manage the paper documents that captured that information, resulting in loss of backup information and contributing to data gaps. The problems within this scenario impact both the breadth and depth of the information. The data was not complete, and in order to successfully provide reports based on the data, the program managers had to make best guesses to fill in the information. This impacted the data quality and the trustworthiness of that data. This is the kind of completeness problem that you want to avoid. You want to make sure the gender field is available as an attribute of the object you want to describe, and you want to make sure that the field has information in it. This is a simple example of the problems that can be created by incomplete data. When a major funder like USAID loses confidence in the data quality and trustworthiness of the data because they see problems, they lose confidence in your ability to deliver on the program. On the flip side, having good data quality and backup for that data causes the funder to gain confidence in the program and increases the chance that the program will be expanded or renewed. Completeness is one of the easiest concepts to grasp, and this next one is fairly easy too, although it requires a little bit more explanation. So let's talk a little bit about validity and accuracy. In the world of data management, including performance data management, validity is sometimes called the conformity to a domain of values. That domain of values might be an actual set of valid values, such as a list of states, a range of values, such as a number between 1 and 100, or a rule that would generate a value, such as GPS coordinate fields being automatically populated from an address. In other words, validity is judged by comparing data to criterion or constraints. So in order to test and measure validity, you need to know the values or rules to which the data should be compared. These are the rules that prevent invalid data from being entered, which goes a long way to help avoid inaccuracy. You can extend the definition of validity to create rules for preventing or assessing duplicate data, which some of our registrants asked about, which in data sets over a very small size is difficult to assess visually. For example, you can create a rule for a beneficiary database indicating that it should be impossible to have two records with the same last name and street address. You can be using a piece of valid data that is nonetheless inaccurate. In order to examine accuracy, you must examine the real-world object that I mentioned before and compare it to the data. So, for example, if I was filling in a state field and entering MD for Maryland, which is a valid response, but I lived in Virginia, the data would be valid but not accurate. Here's another real-world example from my past client experience about how data validity and accurate is important. Last week, this man was a $10,000 per year giver to your organization. And this week, he's no longer your donor. Why? This man's wife was on your mailing list. Some donations were made in her name and some in his. Then his wife died. The man let you know that his wife was deceased, and a development person at your organization assessed the woman's record and selected the wife's status as inactive deceased from a drop-down list. The drop-down list ensured that the person could only select from a range of values. Therefore, it was impossible for the entry to be invalid. And in the donor database, that information also accurately reflected the real-world situation. So to start out, we had both validity and accuracy in the record. However, because of poor data integration between the donor database and the mailing list, the wife was never taken off the organization's mailing list. In that separate data set, she continued to have a status of active. Therefore, even though the husband notified the organization several times that his wife was deceased, the organization continued to send mailings to her. The person doing that data entry into the donor database reported the problem to a manager, but it was not red flagged as a potential persistent data quality issue. As it turned out, the problem took only $1,000 to resolve in the integration by tweaking it, but by the time the organization recognized and reacted to the data quality problem resulting in inaccuracy in one part of the data set, the man was emotionally upset and had lost confidence in the competency of the organization. He therefore canceled his pledge and began giving the same amount to another organization. And so how does this translate financially? For lack of a $1,000 data quality decision being made proactively, the organization lost $200,000 in potential revenue, or what it expected to get from this donor during his lifetime. So that covers validity and accuracy. Now we're going to talk a little bit about consistency. This is a little bit harder for organizations to think about, and it requires a lot of discipline to do well. Data consistency is ensured by the methodology applied for data collection remaining consistent over time, and it is measured by the degree of similarity or the absence of variety within the data. We can measure consistency of similar data over time by looking for trends and differences from the trend. Consistency is what allows for the authentic analysis or interpretation of data over time and across space. In order to ensure this is possible, the data collection process must be well documented, which a lot of organizations don't do, unfortunately, and standardized also. It's something a lot of orgs don't do, to the fullest extent possible. So, for example, Considering every program within a vacuum can be deadly from the standpoint of organizational indicators, the aggregated will provide performance data to both the organization and its key funders, as well as to industry analysts and influencers. If the consistent collection rules for organizational indicators are not applied across all programs, then the organization's performance may be off in ways that are very difficult to spot just by looking at the data, absence the ability to evaluate the record of differing data collection methodologies and make appropriate corrections. Now, that's a lot of quick technical speak, which hopefully the case study will be successful in resolving if you are a little bit confused. I confused myself just by narrating that. So in the case of this story, we are going to talk about consistency and youth services. Consistency will frequently be a problem when critical business definitions change over time, but the fact of that change is not recorded as a separate data point that can be applied to help interpret data trends. So, for example, an organization's definition of at-risk youth might change over the course of a prolonged period of time, and data might be collected relative to that definition. This means that there is a lack of consistency within the data collection and hence within the data itself. The fact of the definition changing is a critical piece of data necessary to interpret the lack of consistency within the data sets and make adjustments accordingly when doing the analysis. Otherwise, it might seem as if the real-world object, in this case the number of at-risk youth, had changed, but in actual fact what changed was how the organization defines at-risk. And now imagine if the organization had changed the definition of at-risk and also the definition of youth, in terms of an age number or age range, and had not recorded that fact. Say they had done each of these 3 and 5 years ago respectively, and they're looking at their service metrics over a period of time and trying to figure out, well, exactly what happened in the data to indicate the trend of differences, when in reality they were not able, because of lack of historic record, to determine when the collection methodology had changed or the definitions had changed. Now we're going to talk a little bit about timeliness. Timeliness refers to the regularity of the data collection and the availability of that data to decision makers, which are two distinct things. But the overall goal is to decrease the time between when the real-world object changes and when the change is known by all relevant parties, which could include program staff, organizational strategists, funders, and other information consumers. Important points to consider regarding timeliness are as follows. If the data has a high degree of volatility, there is an increased risk that the data will not meet standards for timeliness. Volatility is the degree to which data is likely to change over time. An example of low volatility data is gender. An example of high volatility data is salary. Data that has high volatility will need to be checked more frequently to ensure that it remains timely. Data fails to be timely if there is a lag between when a fact becomes known and when it becomes available for use. An example of that is if a program staffer in the field becomes aware of a change to a real-world object, that is important to program outcomes, but if that person then fails to communicate it to program decision makers in a timely manner, perhaps because the change occurred between regular reporting intervals, like quarterly, it could be so that the information doesn't arrive in a timely manner to make a decision. And this highlights the need for all staff to follow both the letter and the spirit of the law when collecting and transmitting data. Because if you're 2.5 months out from a quarterly report and you don't take advantage of an ad hoc opportunity to kick data upstream or downstream, as the case may be, then it might not be available in a timely manner to support a decision. And finally, data fails to be timely when there is a lag between when the data is updated at the source and when it becomes available to decision makers at the other end of the information chain. So for example, if data is contained in a spreadsheet at the program office, but is not yet transmitted to HQ, then you have problems with timeliness. And there are some subtle distinctions there that might be only apparent if you give this a second listen, or if you have follow-up questions, let me know. So this is a picture of the devastation that occurred on the New Jersey coastline during Hurricane Sandy, and many of you who are watching the news around that time will be familiar with images such as this, particularly those of you that are local to that area. Timeliness is of critical importance, particularly when it comes to disaster response. The timeliness of accurate data, such as weather forecasting and resource availability and positioning, helps governments and relief organizations to successfully deliver services to assist those in urgent need because of a natural disaster. Or in another example, some sort of mass human rights violation or civil strife. In the events leading up to, during, and following a large scale event like Hurricane Sandy, the timeliness of data can make a huge difference to providing timely relief. You will find in these particular kinds of situations that the efficiency with which the organizations involved exchange information and the timeliness of that data being able to be combined and interpreted for various actions has a lot to do with how organizations and agencies fare both in the effectiveness of their activities and then also hence in the eyes of public perception in the assessment that takes place following the aftermath of an incident such as this. Now we're going to talk a little bit about integrity. Data integrity is not so much the absence of corruption in the data, although when people think of data integrity, sometimes they use that in that sense, or they use the word integrity in the sense of, um, the as synonymous with data quality. Data integrity and quality are sometimes talked about synonymously. But in this case, we're going to define data integrity as how all of the parts fit together, how the pieces make one whole thing. And some of the registrants for this webinar asked questions about having data in silos or how to integrate different data sources or how to make the case for sort of consolidating all of their data into one location. And there's a lot of cost of value opportunities to be considered in making those kinds of decisions and gaining organizational momentum for them. But to get back to the idea of integrity as being all the parts fitting together, if you have a large database or data warehouse or even a file share with multiple Excel files containing records from a range of systems, people who are using that data have an expectation that they will be able to connect it. They will expect the data to be integrated, right? The integrity of the data in this sense is one of the first things people will question when they cannot use the data in ways that they expect. So it is important to have a plan for how you are joining data from different data sets or tables and how well the joined data fits together. When you have multiple information systems and the data within them relates to each other, you need to create a way to make sure the integrity of that data is present when it is related for the purposes of gaining insight and making decisions. And it was interesting. I was reading a report the other day that said that the number one challenge for business users of CRM platforms or CRMs is integration issues. And this will be no surprise to the majority of you attending this webinar. And also, it said that majority of users would be willing to exchange some features for better ease of use, with better integration being an ease of use factor. So I thought that was interesting. At a very high level, measures of integrity are measures between different tables in the database, how you join data from different data sets or tables, and how well it fits together. It's basically your ability to relate the data cohesively. This is a brief story about integrity in healthcare. Integrity matters in the healthcare industry when you need to be able to bring together data related to diseases from a wide variety of sources. Viewing all of the medical records from a particular hospital is relatively easy by comparison to collecting and analyzing disease-related data from a variety of different hospital systems and other similar institutions. Without being able to easily integrate the various data sets, it is very time consuming to be able to analyze the data, perhaps even to perform predictive analysis that will help to control the spread of a particular disease. So in this case, as in many cases, and including the last one around disaster relief, where there is a high degree of criticality associated with making a quick response, integrity is extremely important, the ease with which the different parts of the data fit together. And you'll notice that there has been a lot of work done to standardize the collection of healthcare data within the United States and globally, particularly over the past decade. It is a continuing challenge and a continuing battle. One of the reasons why that work is being done is to ensure there is integrity across multiple different systems, across multiple different means of collecting data. And that eases the ways in which people can use that data to increase public health and mitigate risk, and also just to treat individual patients within your community. So to do a recap, a definitional recap, here are the aspects of data quality that we covered today. Completeness, which is the breadth and depth of the data as considered through the lens of gender equality, was the case story that we used. Validity and accuracy, which we considered through the lens of donor retention. Consistency, as considered through the lens of youth services. Timeliness, as considered through the lens of disaster response. And integrity, as considered through the lens of healthcare. So again, this is a lot of information that I'm pushing at you really fast. And I just want to remind you that the information from this webinar will be available in several different formats after. By next week, it'll be available in video and MP3 formats, so you can watch it or listen to it on your commute and take notes. And it also will be available sometime after that in transcript format, which we'll also make available for you.
Thank you for joining Community IT for this podcast, Part 1. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and leave us a rating to help others find this leadership resource for nonprofits. Listen for Part 2 in your podcast feed.
Community IT does these free webinars and podcasts for our community, and we love sharing our knowledge and experience. If you have more questions or are having trouble with your IT at your nonprofit, please get in touch with us on our website, www.communityit.com, so we can start a conversation or schedule an assessment. Downloading any of our free resources there will get you signed up for our webinar reminders, and you can attend our next webinar in real time and ask our experts your own questions. If you love podcasts, please subscribe and leave us a rating to help others find this leadership resource for nonprofits.